Do you know anyone who regretted adopting their child? Yes. My sister and her husband. They adopted a very handsome boy from an orphanage in the dissolving Soviet Union, up on the Ukraine border. Conditions in the orphanage were deplorable, of course, as there was no money to support the care and feeding of these children. So that meant that this boy, Sergei, was challenged in his infant and formative toddler years. He was adopted by my sister when he was about 8 years old. This child was very intelligent, with a very sharp mind. He was also very charming, disarming all the adults, neighbors, teachers, social circle friends, with aplomb. I know, he did it to me. The first sign of trouble was when his teachers reported he was totally oppositional in school and class. He refused to participate in any class activities, nor to do any of the classwork assigned to him, even during class time. If his adoptive parents could coax him to do the work at home, he proved to be perfectly capable of learning and doing the coursework. When we counseled him, including me, he would solemnly promise to straighten up and be compliant. But as soon as he turned away from us, it would be as if we had never said a word of counsel to him. A couple of other serious clues began to be apparent. Sergei was drawing shockingly explicit sexual drawings in class, instead of doing his school work. Memories from his life in the orphanage? Likely. Another one was the torturing and harming of the small pets in the household and of neighbors' pets. Other family members reported missing items from their homes after Sergei had visited them. He became increasingly fascinated with the kitchen knives. Sergei began to prowl the house in the middle of the night, often coming to just stand in his parents' bedroom. My sister and her husband became alarmed by Sergei's behavior and installed heavy bolt locks on their bedroom door, so they could sleep safely at night. Sergei became worse. He had a dead look in his eyes, like no soul behind them. He would charm the neighbors with his handsome, wide-eyed innocent persona. They all loved him, some odd anomalies with him, notwithstanding. However, the neighborhood children began to avoid Sergei. I remember visiting on Halloween, and my husband, Sergei's uncle, realized Sergei had no one to go trick-or-treating with, while the neighborhood kids were roving around in gleeful packs. My husband took him around that night. We were so sure we were bonding with our nephew, even if no one else could. Sergei could do that to you, present himself as charming and earnest. The neighborhood kids knew better. Sergei began to tell the neighbors about how my sister and her husband were violently abusive to him, and were psychologically cruel to him. The neighbors, up and down the street, were outraged and appalled. They called Child Protective Services on my sister and spouse. They were cleared of any wrongdoing, but the neighbors began to shun them. They have since had to leave the neighborhood. Finally, the situation became so untenable for my family. My sister and her husband sought to revoke their adoption of Sergei. They hoped the rescission of their adoption would mean Sergei would be sent back to Russia, and they would be safe from retaliation by him. Alas, that was not allowed. Sergei became a ward of the state until he aged out at 18. The state placed him in a facility for disturbed children. It was tightly structured, like a juvenile boot camp, and reports were that Sergei was doing well there. He would call his adoptive mom on occasion and report how happy he was in that place. We prayed that it was true. Last I heard, he roams the city streets now as a male prostitute and drug dealer. He calls my sister now and then. She accepts the calls. That's more than I would do. How long before Sergei finally gets so angry and resentful of what has happened to him and his adoption, that he comes to take revenge on his former family? I can tell you from looking directly into Sergei's eyes, he has the hallmarks of psychopathy. I've often referred to him, when relating the foregoing story, that Sergei may be the next Jeffrey Dahmer. No kidding.